1. The Salt Path Backlash. Exposé reveals shocking claims about Raynor Winn's novel. 2. The Salt Path Exposed. Lies, Deceit, and Desperation. 3. Controversy surrounding the Salt Path. Truth or fiction? 4. The Salt Path Controversy. Raynor Winn addresses allegations. True story debate. 1. The Salt Path Backlash. Exposé reveals shocking claims about Raynor Winn's novel. A feel-good story that inspired millions now faces explosive allegations of deception, and the truth might rewrite everything you thought you knew. Raynor Winn's best-selling memoir The Salt Path, adapted into a major film starring Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs, has been rocked by an investigative report challenging its core narrative. But here's where the controversy erupts. What if the inspirational journey wasn't entirely what readers believed? For years, Winn's account of hiking England's 630-mile southwest coast path with her husband, Moth, after losing their home captivated readers. Marketed as a true story of resilience against homelessness and terminal illness, the book sold over 2 million copies and became a cinematic tearjerker about nature's healing power. The film notably dramatized Moth's corticobasal degeneration, CBD, a rare neurological condition typically fatal within 6 to 8 years. With Winn claiming their coastal trek miraculously stabilized his health. But here's the revelation shaking literary circles. A bombshell exposé by The Observer alleges financial misconduct and medical inconsistencies behind the couple's true story. Former acquaintances contend the Walkers, the couple's real names per sources, lost their Welsh farmhouse not through innocent misfortune, but due to a £64,000 fraud settlement and a family lawsuit over unpaid loans. Even more controversially, neurologists interviewed argue Moth's 12-year survival contradicts typical CBD progression, sparking fury among caregivers who call the healing narrative dangerously misleading. Imagine believing a walk could cure a terminal illness, tweeted one reader whose mother died from CBD. This isn't inspiration, it's exploitation of hope. Social media erupted with similar outrage, particularly toward the film's emotional portrayal of medical recovery. Meanwhile, Winn denies all allegations, calling the article misleading and hinting at legal action. The scandal raises thorny questions. How much artistic license should memoirs take? Does reframing financial missteps as bad investments cross into deception? And crucially, should artists like Anderson and Isaacs who championed this story address the controversy? As publishers and studios stay silent, readers are left wondering, was this a genuine story of human spirit, or a masterclass in myth-making? Where do you stand? If a story inspires millions but bends the truth, does the end justify the means, or does the deception taint its message? Share your thoughts below. 2. The Salt Path Exposed. Lies, Deceit, and Desperation. A tale of resilience, heartbreak, and a journey along England's rugged coast until the truth unravels the myth. But here's where it gets controversial. The best-selling story that inspired millions might be built on a foundation of deception, stolen money, and medical misrepresentations. And this is the part most people miss. The real-life characters behind the fiction are now at the center of a storm that questions the very idea of truth in storytelling. When I first called Rose Hemmings, I expected surprise. A 60-something widow in rural Wales, she'd never spoken to a London journalist. Instead, she sighed and said, "Oh no, I've known for years why you're calling." Her intuition was right, she'd been waiting for this conversation. Rose knew Sally Walker, the woman the world now calls Raynor Winn. As the author of The Salt Path, a memoir that sold 2 million copies and became a film starring Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs, Raynor's story of a couple losing their home, battling illness, and walking 630 miles along the southwest coast path struck a chord. But Rose had a different version. She believed Raynor wasn't who she claimed to be, and that her story was a lie. Let's rewind. In The Salt Path, Raynor and her husband, Moth, real name, Tim Walker, describe a life shattered by a failed investment. A friend named Cooper, they claim, tricked them into a business deal that collapsed, leading to a court order to repossess their 17th-century Welsh farmhouse. The film's premiere in UK saw Raynor, 60, beaming on the red carpet, hailed as a symbol of British grit. But in Wales, Rose Hemmings saw a darker truth. #### the theft that sparked a lie. In the early 2000s, Sally Walker worked part-time as a bookkeeper for Rose and her husband Martin's family business in Poolhelly. By 2008, Martin noticed discrepancies in the accounts. She'd nicked £64,000 over years, Rose revealed. When confronted, Sally sobbed, promising to repay £9,000. But the real debt was far greater. A deal was struck. Martin dropped criminal charges in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and a promise of repayment. Sally vanished. But the scandal didn't end there. In 2010, Sally and Tim were hit with a £150,000 debt from a loan arranged by James, a distant relative of Tim's. James had fronted the money to avoid prison for Sally's theft, but his own business failed, and the debt was transferred to new creditors. Faced with repossession, the Walkers hatched a bizarre scheme. They launched a self-published book and offered readers a chance to win their house in a prize draw. The catch? The house was mortgaged for £230,000. ### the medical mystery. The Salt Path's emotional core hinges on Moth's diagnosis of corticobasal degeneration, CBD, a rare, degenerative brain condition. But here's the twist. CBD typically progresses rapidly, with patients surviving 6 to 8 years post-diagnosis. Tim Walker, however, has lived with the condition for 18 years and shows no visible symptoms. Neurologists I consulted were skeptical. This doesn't pass the sniff test, one said. In Landlines, Raynor even claims Moth's brain scans showed a miraculous recovery. We used to think the Earth was flat, she writes. But experts argue that neuroplasticity doesn't explain such a reversal. ### the French property and the final unraveling. Even more glaring, the couple owned a stone house in southwestern France for years. Local records show they still owe taxes on it. Yet the Salt Path claims they had nowhere to go after their Welsh home was repossessed, forcing them to wild camp. Meanwhile in Wales, the new owner of their old house, Maxine Fairmond, still receives unpaid bills and court judgments in the Walkers' names. A garage owner in Poolhelly told me, "They still owe me £800. I think they can afford it now." Penguin, the publisher of The Salt Path, still describes the book as unflinchingly honest. But when confronted with these allegations, the company and Raynor's team offered no response. The couple's film co-producer, Raynor, and the film's producers also declined to comment. ### a truth in question. So where does this leave readers? For many, the story's message of love, perseverance, and finding strength in adversity resonates. But for those who felt for the couple as victims of a friend's betrayal and a terminal illness, the revelations are jarring. Is it forgivable to omit painful truths in a memoir? Or does this cross into fabrication? The stakes go beyond a single book. In a world where post-truth narratives dominate, how do we distinguish between inspiration and invention? And if a story's power lies in its truth, what happens when that truth is built on a lie? We invite you to weigh in. Does the message of the Salt Path matter more than the facts? ***, is it ethical to reshape a life story for a better narrative? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is a conversation that needs to happen. 3. Controversy surrounding the Salt Path. Truth or fiction? Shocking twist at the heart of a celebrated memoir. Acclaimed author Raynor Winn, whose best-selling book The Salt Path inspired a smash hit film, is now accused of fabricating key parts of her story and even misappropriating tens of thousands of pounds. For years, readers and viewers have been moved by the life-affirming journey of Raynor and her husband Moth, who set off on a 630-mile trek along the southwest coast path after losing their home and facing a terminal illness diagnosis. Critics lauded the memoir for its raw honesty until an explosive Observer investigation surfaced this weekend. But here's where it gets controversial. The report claims that Winn, whose real name appears to be Sally Walker, withdrew around £64,000 from the estate agency where she worked as a bookkeeper. The owner of that business says Walker was arrested and that her alleged theft led to a court case, though no criminal charges were ultimately pressed. And this is the part most people miss. Raynor Winn's memoir describes the couple's house being repossessed because a judge blamed them for debts accrued by a childhood friend's failing business. According to Winn, that court order forced them onto the coastline with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Yet documents reviewed by the Observer suggest the repossession was actually tied to an unpaid loan taken out to cover the money Walker owed her former employer. In fact, the Walkers had borrowed £100,000 from a relative of Moth, whose real name is said to be Tim Walker, and secured the mortgage on their home to guarantee repayment. That same relative reportedly arranged for legal representation and even negotiated a non-disclosure agreement with the estate agency owner. When the relative's own company collapsed, the Walkers lost their home in June 2013. Here's another surprising angle. While the book paints the couple as completely homeless, records show they purchased a property in southwest France back in 2007, a house they still own today. Does that undermine the narrative of total displacement? Or was the French refuge truly out of reach at the darkest moments? Questions also swirl around Moth's 18-year struggle with corticobasal degeneration, CBD. The Observer quotes an Oxford University neuroscientist who says she's never encountered anyone living that long with CBD, raising doubts about the accuracy of the diagnosis that animates all three of Winn's books. Despite these allegations, Winn has responded that the Observer's account is highly misleading and that she is seeking legal advice. She insists the memoir captures the authentic physical and spiritual transformation she and her husband experienced on that rugged coastal route. Meanwhile, the newly released film starring Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs remains a faithful adaptation, according to its production companies, and they stand by the book's content based on due diligence completed before filming. A fourth Winn memoir on Winter Hill is still slated for an October release, though publishers have declined to comment on whether the controversy will affect its publication schedule. Support organizations have even taken sides. PSBA, a charity for people with CBD, has cut ties with the Winns, and Raynor has withdrawn from an upcoming Saltlines tour. What do you make of these allegations? Is this a case of sensational reporting, or did the author embellish critical details to craft a more gripping story? Do you still trust the journey that moved millions, or do these revelations change everything? Share your thoughts below and join the debate. 4. The Salt Path controversy. Raynor Winn addresses allegations. True story debate. Is the inspiring story of survival and resilience you thought you knew a carefully constructed illusion? The Salt Path, Raynor Winn's best-selling memoir about a couple's incredible journey walking the 630-mile southwest coast path after losing their home, has become a global phenomenon, spawning a successful film starring Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs. But now serious questions are being raised about the truth behind this captivating narrative, and the author is fiercely defending her account. Recently, The Observer published a deeply unsettling investigation, https://observercompanyuk/news/national/article/The Real Salt Path, how the couple behind a bestseller left a trail of debt and deceit, alleging significant discrepancies and potential misrepresentations within Winn's story. Let's unpack what's happening and what we know so far. What's the Salt Path all about? Since its release in March 2018, The Salt Path has resonated with millions, selling over 2 million copies worldwide. The book chronicles Raynor and her husband, Moth's, decision to walk the challenging Southwest Coast path after facing devastating financial hardship. According to Winn's account, they lost their home and a substantial sum of money due to a failed investment in a friend's business, leaving them with considerable debts. Simultaneously, Moth received a grim diagnosis, corticobasal degeneration, CBD, a rare and progressive neurological disorder typically carrying a life expectancy of 6 to 8 years. Driven by their circumstances, the couple embarked on their extraordinary walk in 2013. The book vividly details their experiences, the grueling physical demands of the trail, the resourcefulness required to survive on minimal funds, primarily weekly tax credits, and the kindness of strangers they encountered along the way. They lived by wild camping, embracing a minimalist existence while confronting both hardship and unexpected beauty. The narrative culminates in a hopeful new beginning with the offer of accommodation, and Winn credits the walk with improving her husband's health, who has now lived far beyond the initial prognosis. Winn has since published 2 further books exploring similar themes, with a 4th on the horizon. But here's where it gets controversial. What does the Observer's investigation claim? The Observer's investigation paints a dramatically different picture. It alleges that the couple's home wasn't lost due to a bad business deal, but rather as a consequence of Winn allegedly defrauding her employer of £64,000. To cover this alleged theft, they reportedly borrowed £100,000 at an exorbitant 18% interest rate from a relative, secured against their house. Adding to the complexity, they already had a £230,000 mortgage on the property, meaning their total debt significantly exceeded the house's value. Ultimately, the house was repossessed after legal action was taken to recover the borrowed funds. Furthermore, the investigation suggests the couple owned a property in France, which, according to villagers interviewed, was in a state of disrepair and rarely occupied, with the couple seemingly preferring to live in caravans on the land. And this is the part most people miss. Medical experts consulted by The Observer expressed skepticism regarding Moth's CBD diagnosis, citing his unusually long survival, the absence of acute symptoms, and his apparent ability to reverse some of the condition's effects. The newspaper also claims that Raynor and Moth Winn are not their real names, adding another layer of intrigue to the unfolding situation. Following the publication of the article, the PSBA, Primary Support for People with CBD, a charity that had previously worked with the Winns, severed ties with the family, stating that too many questions currently remain unanswered. Winn has subsequently withdrawn from the Saltlines tour, a planned series of performances with the Gigs banner big band. How has Raynor Winn responded? In a statement released through her literary agents, Winn has described the Observer's article as highly misleading and confirmed that she is seeking legal advice, declining to comment further at this time. She maintains that the Salt Path represents the true story of our journey, emphasizing the transformative power of their experience. Film producers have issued statements asserting that they undertook necessary due diligence before optioning the book and that the film is a faithful adaptation. The film stars Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs have yet to comment. BBC Film, a financier of the film, has also declined to provide a statement. The film has grossed approximately $16 million worldwide, though its release in key markets like Germany, France, and the US remains pending. This situation raises profound questions about the ethics of memoir writing, the responsibility of publishers and filmmakers, and the potential for blurring the lines between personal narrative and factual accuracy. Do you believe that authors have a responsibility to ensure complete factual accuracy in their memoirs, even if it means sacrificing some of the emotional impact? Or is there a degree of artistic license that is acceptable? Share your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this complex and evolving story.